Chapter 1. The Knock on the Door. David Mercer wiped a streak of engine grease across his cheek without noticing. The mid-morning sun slanted into the garage, turning drifting dust into tiny gold flecks. His old Camaro sat on jacks. It had opened like a jaw in mid-scream, a project he'd been meaning to finish for months. Today felt like the first quiet morning in a long time. His daughter was away at college, and his wife, Marissa, had slept in late after claiming she wasn't feeling well the night before. He leaned over the engine bay, humming softly to himself, the kind of absent tune a man makes when everything feels normal. Normal. Funny how fast that word can die. A sharp knock echoed through the open garage, shattering the calm. It wasn't the casual tap of a neighbor or a delivery guy. It was firm, official, almost rehearsed. David straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. One SEC. When he stepped into the sunlight, blinking, he saw a uniformed police officer standing at the edge of his driveway. Tall, broad-shouldered, mid-40s maybe, with steady eyes behind dark lenses. His patrol car idled by the curb, lights off. "Mr. David Mercer?" the officer asked. David nodded, confused. "Yeah, that's me." The officer removed his sunglasses slowly, almost regretfully. "I'm Officer Jackson, Fremont County Police Department." "Sir, may I speak with you for a moment?" David's first instinct was irritation mixed with unease. Parking complaints? Break-ins? Something with the HOA? His mind wandered through the normal list of suburban annoyances. "Sure," he said. "Is everything all right?" Officer Jackson inhaled, as if bracing himself. David didn't realize that this would be the last moment in his life that still felt familiar. "I'm very sorry to inform you," Jackson began, voice dropping into a tone David had only ever heard on crime documentaries. "There's been an accident." David blinked. "An accident? A vehicle collision," the officer clarified. "It occurred at approximately 8:45 this morning on County Road 17. David's heart jumped, his breath hitching. "Is this about my daughter? Leah? She's at school. Why would she—" "No, sir." Jackson hesitated. The kind of hesitation that feels like a verdict. "Your wife, Marissa Mercer." Everything inside David went still. A quiet so intense it drowned out the world. Jackson swallowed. "She didn't survive the crash." For a moment, David genuinely thought he'd misheard him, or that the officer was confusing him with someone else. This was someone else's conversation, someone else's world. A thin, strained laugh escaped him. "I'm sorry, what?" "No. That can't be right." "Mr. Mercer, no," David repeated, more forcefully this time. "That's impossible. My wife is upstairs. She's sleeping. Right now." Jackson's brows pulled together. "Sir, the woman found in the vehicle had her identification. Marissa Mercer. Age 39. Photo matched." David shook his head vigorously. "No. Listen, I saw her this morning. At 6. She was right there, in the kitchen making coffee. She said she was tired and was going back upstairs. She's been home all night. She hasn't left." "Are you certain?" Jackson asked quietly. "Of course I'm certain." David snapped, voice cracking. "She's upstairs. You can't tell me she died an hour ago when she's literally in my bed right now." A long silence stretched between them. Jackson's training, instincts, and something deeper, a ripple of unease, slid across his expression. "Mr. Mercer, would you allow me to come inside to confirm?" David didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely. Come on." He turned toward the house with hurried steps, but Jackson stopped him with a raised hand. "Sir, I need you to walk ahead of me and keep your hands visible. It's just procedure." "Procedure? For what?" David demanded. Jackson didn't answer. He simply followed, one hand resting near his holster as they entered the house. The living room was tidy, quiet, still smelling faintly of Marissa's lavender diffuser. David moved quickly through it, up the stairs 2 at a time, calling over his shoulder, "You'll see. She's right here." Jackson's breathing grew more measured, slow, deliberate. His boots were silent but heavy behind David. At the top of the stairs, David pushed open the bedroom door. Morning light poured in through the curtains. The bed was exactly as he'd left it, covers rising gently around the shape beneath them. "There," David exhaled, relief flooding back into his voice. See? She's sleeping. Officer Jackson stepped into the doorway, and the relief on David's face froze, because the officer's hand slid instantly to his gun. "Mr. Mercer," Jackson said sharply. "Step back." "What? Why?" "She's right. Step back now." David stumbled backward, hands raised instinctively. His voice shook. "What are you doing?" "That's my wife." Jackson approached the bed slowly, weapon drawn but lowered. Eyes narrowed as he studied the unmoving figure under the blanket. "Ma'am," he called softly. "Marissa." No answer. He reached forward with one gloved hand and gently gripped the blanket. David held his breath. Jackson pulled the blanket down, and the world split in half. A mannequin stared up at them. A woman-shaped plastic body, molded features, wig styled precisely like Marissa's dark wavy hair, and dressed in her lavender nightgown. Her favorite one, the one she'd worn last night. David's knees almost buckled. What the hell is that?" he whispered. Jackson stepped back, gun fully raised now. "Mr. Mercer, stay where you are." That's not," David sputtered, shaking his head so hard his vision blurred. No, this isn't real. This isn't funny. What is this? Where's my wife?" "You tell me," Jackson shot back. "Sir, did you place this here?" "Of course not," David shouted, voice cracking under panic. I don't even know where that came from. She was here. She was here this morning." Jackson's eyes scanned the room. No signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry. Everything neat. Too neat. "Mr. Mercer," he said firmly, "when exactly was the last time you saw your wife?" David clutched his head, trying to force his memory into some coherent order. "This morning. She was making coffee. She said she was tired. She said she'd go back to bed. She walked right up these stairs." "Sir, this," Jackson gestured cautiously at the mannequin, "is not a sleeping woman. This was placed here. Intentionally." David staggered backward, hands trembling. "She was here," he whispered. "She was here. I swear to God. She was here." Jackson's expression grew tight, professional but shaken. "Mr. Mercer, something is very wrong here." David stared at the mannequin's lifeless face, its fake eyelashes, its painted lips arranged almost mockingly into a soft, serene expression. He felt his chest constrict, breath thinning into a painful burn. "I don't understand," he whispered. Jackson holstered his weapon slowly, but kept his guard high. "Mr. Mercer," he said quietly, "we need to figure out what happened between the moment you saw your wife this morning and the moment this thing ended up in her place." David turned back to the mannequin. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It didn't explain a damn thing. And for the first time in his life, David Mercer realized he wasn't scared because he didn't know where his wife was. He was scared because he wasn't sure he ever really knew where she'd been at all. Chapter 2. Something is very wrong. A mannequin in his wife's bed. A police officer with his gun drawn. And a growing hollow inside David Mercer's chest that felt like the edge of freefall. For several seconds after the discovery, neither man spoke. Officer Jackson kept scanning the room, jaw tight, while David stood frozen, unable to form a single coherent thought. Finally, Jackson spoke. "Mr. Mercer, please step back downstairs. We need to secure the house." David didn't argue. He moved like a man underwater, descending each stair as if the gravity in his home had shifted. His hands shook uncontrollably. His breath came shallow and too quick. When they reached the living room, Jackson spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 24. We have a possible scene at 19 Willow Lane. Requesting additional units and forensic support." Static crackled, then confirmation. David rubbed his face, smearing engine grease across his forehead. I don't get it. She was here. She was actually here." Jackson didn't respond. He paced the room, eyes absorbing every detail. The untouched breakfast dishes, the half-full coffee mug on the counter, the faint scent of lavender that still clung to the air. 2 police cars arrived moments later, red and blue lights flashing silently. Officers stepped out, hands on their belts, scanning the neighborhood as they approached the house. David realized with a sick twist of dread that the flashing lights were already drawing attention. Curtains shifted across the street. Porch doors opened. Within minutes, neighbors were drifting out of their homes, whispering and pointing. He felt his stomach roll. Great. The Mercers are now the morning entertainment. Inside, the officers fanned out. Search every room, Jackson instructed. Look for signs of forced entry, disturbance, anything out of place. David sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring blankly at the carpet pattern. Footsteps echoed upstairs. Cabinet doors opened and closed. Radios crackled. Every sound felt like an intrusion. After 20 minutes, Jackson reappeared. Mr. Mercer, I need to ask you some questions. David nodded numbly. Yeah, okay. Tell me about your wife. Has she been acting unusual recently? Unusual. That was too gentle a word. But at first, David didn't know what to say. Where did he start? Which little oddity mattered? He swallowed hard. She's been distant. The past month especially. How so? David took a shaky breath. She started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen, but lately she'd grab it the second it buzzed. She'd step outside to take calls. What kind of calls? Jackson asked. I don't know, David admitted. But she'd lower her voice, turn away from me. When I asked, she said it was just work stuff. But Marissa's a dental hygienist. What kind of emergency calls does she get? Jackson nodded for him to continue. And she bought new clothes, David said slowly. A whole new wardrobe. Stuff she never wears around me. Dresses, heels, expensive perfume. Did she explain the purchases? She said she wanted to feel good again. And I thought, David's voice lowered. I thought maybe she was just going through something personal. I didn't push. Jackson scribbled notes. And lately, David said, she'd disappear for a few hours at a time. Errands, she said. Groceries. But she didn't come back with anything. Did you confront her? David shook his head helplessly. No, I didn't want to accuse her of anything without proof. I didn't want to be that kind of husband. Jackson studied him for a long moment. Were you two having relationship problems? David hesitated. Not like that. We had normal arguments, sure, but nothing serious. At least, I didn't think so. Before Jackson could continue, one of the officers came down the stairs. Nothing unusual in the other rooms, she reported. No forced entry anywhere. Garage doors closed. Windows are locked. Jackson nodded. Thank you. She hesitated. But sir, the basement door was open. David looked up sharply. Open? I never go down there. Jackson turned to David, face tightening. Has anyone else had access to your home recently? Housekeepers? Contractors? No, David said. Just us. The officer added, the basement itself is normal. Dust, boxes, storage. Nothing disturbed. David rubbed his temples. I don't understand any of this. Outside, more neighbors had gathered, forming clusters on the sidewalk. Their murmurs drifted through the doorway. There's police again. I told you something was off with that marriage. Do you think she ran away? No, they said someone died. David slammed the front door shut to cut off their voices. God, this is humiliating. Focus on your wife right now. Not the neighbors, Jackson said gently. David paced the room. You're telling me a mannequin, a full-size mannequin dressed like my wife, somehow ended up in my bed. And you think I wouldn't notice if that wasn't her this morning? Jackson didn't respond immediately. Mr. Mercer, is it possible you only thought you saw her? Shadows, blankets, assumptions, no, David snapped. She was in the kitchen. She spoke to me. She kissed my cheek. Did you physically see her face? Jackson asked quietly. David stopped. The world tilted. He replayed the memory. The kitchen dim in the early morning. Marissa standing with her back to him, hair down, robe pulled tight. She had spoken with her head turned only slightly. Had he seen her face? Or had he simply recognized her shape, her voice? His heart dropped like a stone. He swallowed hard. I don't know. Maybe it was dark. Maybe, could someone have been impersonating her? That doesn't make sense either, David muttered. But now everything felt unstable. His memories, the morning, the shape in the bed. Was any of it her? Jackson placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Mr. Mercer, I need you to listen carefully. Whether your wife is missing, hiding, or in danger, we don't know yet. But something is definitely wrong inside this house. David lifted his gaze. So what happens now? Jackson exhaled. The property is officially being classified as a potential crime scene. A what? We can't rule anything out. Disappearance. Identity theft. Foul play. Staged death. Whatever this is, we need to investigate properly. David stared in bewilderment. The house felt suddenly foreign, like someone else's home with someone else's secrets. So what do you need me to do? He asked quietly. Jackson straightened. For procedure, we need you to leave the property temporarily. You'll stay somewhere else until we finish processing the house. David felt as if the floor had dropped out beneath him. Leave? My own home. It's necessary, Jackson said. We'll escort you out, and you can come back when we're done. This is no longer just a missing person situation. Until we understand what happened to your wife, or who placed that mannequin, this house is officially under police control. David looked around his living room, at the couch where he watched movies with Marissa, the framed photos on the mantel, the messy bookshelf she always meant to organize, and felt a deep tremor of dread settle into his bones. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And whatever it was, it had already begun. Chapter 3, Calling the One Person Who Can Help. The hotel room smelled like industrial detergent and faint cigarette smoke, a combination that made David's stomach twist every time he walked through the door. He'd checked in the night before after police forced him out of his own home. Room 214. Beige walls. Thin sheets. A view of the parking lot where a flickering light buzzed all night. He hadn't slept more than an hour. His wife was supposedly dead. Yet she'd been in his house, or something had been in his house, only hours earlier. And now a mannequin lay in the bed where she should have been. He couldn't stay silent another second. David grabbed his phone with trembling hands and scrolled until he reached the number he'd been dodging for months. His brother, Daniel. He stared at the contact photo, Daniel in a leather jacket, smirking like a man who knew everyone's secrets, then hit call. It rang twice. Then a groggy voice answered. If this isn't a life-or-death situation, I'm hanging up. Dan, it is. A beat of silence. David. Daniel's tone sharpened instantly. What happened? David felt his voice crack. I don't know where to start. Start anywhere, Daniel said. Just talk. So David did. He told him everything. The officer at the door. The news that Marissa had supposedly died in a car crash. The mannequin in the bed. The police turning his home into a crime scene. The neighbors watching like vultures. He spoke until his throat burned. Daniel didn't interrupt, not once. Just quiet breathing on the line, absorbing each detail with the patience of someone who had spent a lifetime reading between the lines. When David finished, the silence stretched long enough to make him uneasy. Finally, Daniel exhaled. Okay, first, you're not crazy. It feels like I'm losing my mind. Second, something's not adding up. At all. David rubbed his face. Yeah, no kidding. Daniel's voice turned steady, professional, the tone he used when taking control of a situation. Listen, I'm coming out there. You don't have to. I just needed. I'm coming, Daniel repeated. This is what I do. If someone's lying to you, hiding, staging something, I'll find it. Dan, where are you staying? Fairfield and off Route 8. I'll be there in 3 hours. The call ended before David could say another word. 3 hours felt like 3 days. David paced the hotel room until he wore a path in the cheap carpet. News reports droned softly from the TV, but every time the mannequin wife mystery segment aired, he muted it instantly. He didn't want to hear the speculation. He didn't want to see his house on the screen, with flashing police lights and neighbors giving interviews like they were auditioning for reality TV. He just wanted answers. A knock rattled the door. David opened it to find Daniel leaning casually against the wall, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He looked exactly the same, 5 o'clock shadow, dark eyes that saw too much, an expression that managed to be both amused and concerned. Well, Daniel said, stepping inside. You look like hell. Thanks, David muttered. Really helping my confidence right now. Good. Daniel dropped his bag. You shouldn't have confidence. You should be scared and furious because someone is screwing with you. David let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. I need someone on my side. You've got me, Daniel said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Now walk me through everything again. Slowly this time. They sat on the bed. David retold the entire story, pausing to answer Daniel's rapid-fire questions. What time did she make coffee? You're sure you didn't see her face? Has she been stressed lately? Any unknown charges on credit cards? Any new friends? New patterns? Anything weird? David told him about the secretive phone calls, the new wardrobe, the unexplained absences. Daniel's expression darkened. Yeah, that's not nothing. That's a breadcrumb trail. To what? Daniel didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he stood and grabbed his bag. I'm going to start digging. Phone records, security footage, bank statements. I'll tap a few contacts. Contacts. David raised a brow. You don't want to know, right? Daniel slung his jacket over one arm. Stay put. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to neighbors. Don't talk to police unless it's the lead detective. And for God's sake, don't go back into the house. David nodded. Just find her, Dan. Alive or dead. I just need to know. Daniel paused at the door, his voice softening. I will. Then he was gone. The next few days blurred together. David woke in the hotel room, wandered aimlessly, watched too much news, ignored too many phone calls, and jumped at the sound of every text message. Reporters stalked the parking lot. Twice, someone tried to interview him as he got into his car. Mr. Mercer, is it true your wife's body was never found? Do you believe your wife staged her own death? Is the mannequin a message? A warning? David shoved past them each time, face burning with a mix of fear and rage. The story spread online, faster and nastier. Mannequin wife mystery became a trending headline. People posted theories, memes, TikToks. Some accused him. Some accused Marissa. Some just made jokes. It was hell. He stopped looking at the news entirely. Only Daniel's daily check-ins kept him sane. Then, on the fourth evening, while David sat hunched over the hotel desk, staring blankly at a cup of untouched coffee, his phone lit up. Daniel, be there in 5. We need to talk. Something in the pit of David's stomach twisted. 5 minutes later, Daniel knocked sharply twice. David opened the door immediately. Daniel stepped inside, expression unreadable, which was never good with him. He pulled a folder from his jacket and tossed it onto the bed. We have something, Daniel said. David's heart pounded. You found Marissa? No, Daniel said quietly. But I found who she's been spending time with. He opened the folder. Inside were printed photographs, grainy but unmistakable. Marissa, at a cafe, at a hotel lobby, walking to a parked car, standing too close to someone. A man, more specifically, David's business partner, Julian Hart. David felt his world tilt sideways. Why? He swallowed hard. Why is she with him? Daniel's voice was gentle for once. That's what we have to figure out. He slid the last photo toward David, one where Marissa and Julian were sitting together at an outdoor restaurant, leaning in close, smiling over wine. David stared at it long enough for his vision to blur. His hands shook. His throat burned. His chest tightened with something sharp and devastating. Dan, he whispered, shattered. What the hell is going on? Daniel put a steady hand on his shoulder. We're going to find out. Chapter 4, The Affair, and something much worse. David stared at the photo in his hands, so long his fingers went numb. Marissa and Julian sitting together, leaning close, smiling over wine, the type of smile reserved for comfort and affection. An intimacy that had no place between them. Daniel watched him silently from across the hotel bed, arms folded, eyes steady. He'd always been the type to drop information like a bomb and then let the aftermath burn itself out. David finally looked up. How long have you known? I didn't know, Daniel said. Not until today. But I suspected something was off the second you told me she'd been taking secret calls. New clothes. Disappearing. The mannequin. That wasn't just an affair. That was orchestration. David felt something cold creep up his spine. What do you mean? Daniel didn't speak immediately. He knelt, unzipping his bag, and pulled out a second folder, thicker, darker. He placed it on the bed between them. David, he said quietly, you need to brace yourself. This isn't just infidelity. This is something bigger. Something calculated. David's pulse hammered in his ears. Dan, just say it. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots, receipts, timestamped photos, and something that looked like bank statements. He pointed to the first page, a grainy photo. Marissa standing at the filing cabinet in David's home office, phone angled downward. The timestamp on the photo, 2 weeks ago. David's throat tightened. Was she? Photographing your financial documents, Daniel finished. Insurance policies. Banking info. Investor contracts. All yours. David grabbed the photo, staring in disbelief. Why would she do that? Daniel didn't soften the blow. Because she needed access to everything you own. David's breath stuttered. For what? Daniel slid another document forward. An invoice from a digital printing shop, issued under a fake name, but paid for with a card Marissa used frequently. The description, high-resolution identification printing. David frowned. Is that what I think it is? Fake IDs, Daniel confirmed. Driver's licenses. Passports. Social security cards. She ordered them. A ringing filled David's ears. His voice cracked. Dan, no, she wouldn't do something like that. Daniel's expression darkened. She already did. He pulled out another stack of photos. These captured Marissa entering and leaving a nondescript warehouse building on the far side of town. The cracked windows and faded signage were unmistakable. That place, David whispered. Isn't that where identity fabricators, Daniel said. People who build new lives for a price. Cash only. No paperwork. David stumbled back, his knees nearly buckling. No, Jesus. No. Daniel stepped closer. David, listen to me. She wasn't just cheating. She was preparing to disappear. David felt the room spin. Disappear where? That's the part I'm still piecing together, Daniel said. But I know who she was going to disappear with. He tapped the photo of Julian. David flinched as if struck. Julian? My partner? My friend. This wasn't just an affair, Daniel said. It was a partnership. A conspiracy. David pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. Then what, why? Why would she steal my identity? Why would she work with him? Daniel flipped to the next sheet, bank records printed in columns of cold, emotionless text. Several large withdrawals over the past month. Withdrawals David didn't recognize. He pointed to the amounts. CDs? 5,000 here. 8,000 there. All taken from your joint savings account. David's eyes widened. She said those were transfers for Leia's tuition. Daniel shook his head. She lied. He pushed the next page forward, a blurry photo of Marissa handing an envelope of cash to a man in a dark hoodie. She's been paying people, Daniel said, not just for fake IDs, for logistics, travel, disappearance planning. David's breath came in harsh, uneven bursts. No, Dan, this can't be real. Marissa isn't, she wouldn't. Daniel leaned in. David, she was planning to take everything. All your assets, all your accounts, all your investments. David felt something deep inside him fracture. Why? Why would she do something like that? I don't know yet, Daniel admitted. Jealousy? Resentment? Manipulation? Julian? Maybe all of it. But she wasn't going to leave quietly. She was going to drain you dry. David clutched the edge of the dresser for support. So the mannequin, the police, the crash, what was that? Daniel let out a long, steady breath. Part of her plan. David stared at him. Explain. Daniel picked up the news printout, the article about Marissa's fatal crash, and placed it in front of David. She didn't die, he said. She staged her death. David's heart slammed against his ribs. But the police said police only identified the victim through the ID found at the scene, Daniel said. There was no body matching Marissa's description, no definitive physical ID, just burned remains they assumed were hers because of the ID. David blinked, stunned. She planted her ID. Exactly. So the accident, David whispered. Wasn't an accident, Daniel said. It was the beginning of her escape plan. The words hit David like a punch to the chest. He sank onto the edge of the hotel bed, head in his hands. It felt like the floor, the walls, the ceiling, all of it was collapsing inward. She was going to leave the country, Daniel continued softly. With Julian, under new identities. With your money. David laughed, a broken, hollow sound. And everyone would think she was dead. Yes. And I'd be left, what? Alone? Broke? Destroyed? Yes. The finality in Daniel's voice shattered him. David covered his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking. She planned this. She planned all of this. While living with me. While sleeping next to me. Daniel sat beside him, not touching him, but close enough to anchor him. I'm sorry, David. David forced himself to breathe, to think, to understand. The mannequin dressed as Marissa. The fake crash. The disappearing money. The new wardrobe. The secret calls. Julian's smile in the photos. It all aligned into one horrifying truth. Marissa hadn't died. She had tried to erase herself and him. David lifted his head, eyes burning. Dan, yes. She wanted to vanish, David whispered. And she wanted me ruined. Daniel nodded grimly. David looked down at the evidence spread across the bed, the photos, the documents, the receipts of betrayal. For the first time since this nightmare began, something inside him hardened, became sharp. She's not gone, David said, voice low. She's out there, and she thinks she got away with this. Daniel held his gaze. What are you thinking? David clenched his jaw. That I'm done being her victim. A long silence stretched between them. Then Daniel spoke, barely above a whisper. Then let's find out exactly how deep this goes. Chapter 5, David decides to fight back. David didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in the dim hotel room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the air conditioner while Daniel snored softly in the next bed. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marissa's face, smiling in Julian's car, handing cash to a stranger, browsing through fake identification lists as if she were picking outfits. The betrayal stung. The humiliation burned. But the cold, calculated plan to erase him, to drain him and leave him for dead, ignited something else entirely. By dawn, the decision was made. He wasn't going to report her. He wasn't going to beg or plead or crumble. He was going to fight back. And he was going to make sure the end of this story belonged to him. When Daniel woke, groggy and disheveled, David was already dressed, pacing the room with a wired, sharp determination. Daniel frowned. You okay? No, David said, but I know what I'm going to do. Daniel sat up. Talk to me. David stopped pacing. She thinks she's running a game, but I built the life she's trying to steal. That means I can build something else, something she won't see coming. Daniel studied him for a long moment. What kind of something? A counter scheme, David said. Something that uses her plan against her. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're talking payback. No, David said quietly. I'm talking justice. They spent the next hour in the hotel lobby, hunched over a table, whispering ideas and crossing them out almost immediately. Expose her publicly? Daniel offered. No, David said. She'd run faster. Track her movements and intercept her before she leaves? Too risky. We'd lose control. Fake your own death. David blinked. Let's circle back to that. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel tapped his pen thoughtfully. What if we sabotage her plan from the inside? David's eyes narrowed. Go on. She hired people. Identity fabricators. Cash handlers. Drivers. You get to them first. Turn them. Use them to funnel her right where you want her. David leaned back, letting the idea settle. It felt right. Strategic. Poetic. And where exactly do I want her? David murmured. Where she can't hurt you again, Daniel said. Where you're in control of every variable. David's mind clicked with dark clarity. He knew exactly where. By mid-afternoon, they drove across town to meet the first recruit, Riley Ward. David hadn't seen him in years, not since Riley left the military and started a quiet, unstable life on the outskirts of the city. But if anyone could help them execute something extreme, something precise, it was Riley. They found him behind a small auto shop, leaning against a stack of tires, smoking a cigarette and watching them approach with tired curiosity. David Mercer, Riley said with a slow grin. Didn't think I'd see you again. Wish it were under better circumstances, David said. Riley flicked his cigarette aside. Daniel said you need help with something off-book. Something intense. David exchanged a glance with Daniel. Yeah. Riley folded his arms. So, tell me. David told him everything. The affair. The identity theft. The staged death. The plan to disappear. Riley didn't interrupt once. When David finished, Riley let out a low whistle. Damn, your wife's colder than half the guys I served with. David swallowed hard, but stayed silent. Riley continued, so, what do you need me for? Daniel answered, a body. Riley blinked. A what? A corpse, David clarified carefully. A fake one. Someone who can convincingly play dead for stage photos. Someone who can handle tight spaces, contorted positions, and hold completely still. Someone calm. Someone trained. Riley stared for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smirked. Haven't played dead since combat training, he said. But hell, why not? Sounds like one hell of a story. So you're in? David asked. Riley slapped David's shoulder. You bet your life I am. One down. One very big problem to go. The identity forger. Lucas Kane. The man Marissa had paid to craft her new identity, and Julian's. David and Daniel found him in an abandoned office loft above a closed laundromat. He was wiry, fast-talking, and twitchy, the type of man who lived his whole life in the shadows of fake names. Lucas almost slammed the door in their faces the moment he saw them. Nope, he stammered, voice squeaking. I'm not getting involved with a domestic mess. I just print IDs. Daniel shoved his boot into the door before Lucas could close it. Relax, Daniel said calmly. We're not here to bust you. We're here to offer something. Lucas's eyes darted nervously. What? Your life, David said bluntly. Lucas froze. What does that mean? David stepped closer. You're helping my wife disappear. You're stealing my family's identity. And you've already taken money from her. If I go to the police, do you know how fast they'll dig up every fake identity you've ever made? Lucas swallowed. Daniel crossed his arms. And we have photos of you accepting cash from her. Multiple recordings. Enough to put you away. Lucas's knees nearly buckled. Okay, what do you want? David's voice dropped into something cold and resolute. I want you to switch sides. Lucas blinked. Switch? You're going to pretend to continue helping Marissa, David explained. Give her everything she needs. Help her finalize her exit plan, exactly as she expects. And then, Lucas whispered. David leaned in, eyes dark. Then you're going to deliver her to me. Lucas stared, terrified but trapped. And if I don't, he said, voice barely audible. Daniel smiled without warmth. Then you'll be building fake IDs behind prison bars. Lucas's shoulders slumped. Fine, I'll help you. David nodded once. Good. 2 down. Now for the hardest part. That night, David stood in his basement, staring at the empty concrete walls. It was cold, gray, silent, just like he felt inside. Daniel stood beside him, arms crossed, surveying the space the way a strategist studies a battleground. You sure about this? Daniel asked quietly. David nodded. She wanted a new life, a new identity, a disappearing act. His jaw clenched. So, I'm going to give her a new life. Just not the one she planned. Daniel didn't ask for clarification. He already knew. Together, they walked through the space, pointing, planning, transforming. Soundproofing goes here, David said. A bed there. A small kitchenette. Locks on the outside of the door. Cameras hidden behind the vents. Temperature controls only accessible upstairs. It became a blueprint, a living space, a place where Marissa's lies would finally be contained. Once she thinks everything is ready, Daniel said, Lucas will guide her right back here. David nodded, and Riley will play the corpse she expects to disappear with. He stepped back, taking in the basement as if seeing its future. This was going to be Marissa's new life. Not an escape, not freedom, not a glamorous future with Julian, but the life she built for herself. David clenched his fists, his voice steady and low. She thinks she's the puppeteer, he said, but the strings are mine now. And when she completes her plan, he exhaled slowly. She'll walk right into mine. Chapter 6, The Real Accident. The night chosen for the accident was cold enough that David could see his breath inside the garage. He stood beside his Camaro, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the anticipation that came with executing a plan engineered down to its final bolt. Riley appeared from the shadows, already dressed in the clothes Marissa was supposed to be wearing the night she died. A wig, same color as hers. The same jacket, same earrings. He twirled slightly. Convincing enough? David nodded. You look exactly like her from a distance. Good, Riley said, cracking his knuckles. Let's give the world a death they won't question. Daniel checked the trunk of the beat-up sedan they'd purchased for the crash. Body bag ready. Makeup done. Drug syringes ready for Lucas. He shot David a glance. It's all in motion. David's jaw set. Then it's time. The crash had to be loud. Violent. Real. Daniel drove the sedan toward the empty stretch of highway where Lucas was waiting with a tow truck they'd modified to look like a roadside service vehicle. Riley lay in the passenger seat, perfectly still, his body posed at an unnatural angle. From afar, he looked lifeless. David followed behind in his truck, keeping just far enough not to be associated, just close enough to hear the impact. At exactly 2:12 a.m., Daniel jerked the wheel, slamming the sedan into a concrete barrier. Metal crunched. Glass exploded. Sparks flew. The sound echoed across the deserted road like a cannon blast. David braked hard, heart hammering as he watched from the darkness. Daniel stumbled out of the car, coughing dramatically, waving down Lucas, who rolled up seconds later in the tow truck. Riley didn't move, not even when the airbag deflated against his face. Lucas leaned into the car, checked for a pulse, and shook his head. She's gone. He even used air quotes. David kept his distance as Lucas and Daniel transferred Riley's body to the pre-prepared corner-style bag. They zipped it halfway, leaving a small, breathing flap hidden inside. Riley blinked once at David before they closed it over him. "Showtime," Riley whispered. Then darkness swallowed him. David's performance at 3:04 a.m. The police knocked on the door of David's hotel room. He opened it slowly, rubbing his eyes as if woken from deep sleep. "Mr. Mercer?" Officer Caldwell asked, voice steady but heavy. We're very sorry. There's been an accident." David froze, letting the words hit him like fists. "And what? An accident? It's your wife, Marissa Mercer," the officer said gently. "A fatal crash. We are very sorry for your loss." David took a shaking breath. He mirrored the exact reaction he'd practiced earlier, stumbling backward, grabbing the wall, letting his face drain of color. No, she was supposed to be home. The officer stepped forward. "Sir, we understand. Please sit down." David sank onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. The pain he allowed to show was real, but it wasn't grief. It was betrayal, fury, and cold justice, all simmering inside him. The officers gave him time, murmuring condolences, offering support. David nodded weakly, hugging himself. The perfect widower. The perfect victim. "Do you need someone with you tonight, Mr. Mercer?" Officer Caldwell asked softly. David shook his head. I just want to be alone." "Of course. We'll stay in touch for the formal identification." David nodded, eyes glossy. "Thank you." As the door closed behind them, his expression shifted, calm, sharp, focused. The world now believed Marissa Mercer was dead, just as planned. The real Marissa, while David played the grieving husband under the glow of hotel lamps and sympathetic officers, something very different was happening miles away. Marissa Mercer, drugged, unconscious, stripped of her phone and purse, was being carried down into David's basement. Lucas, shaking as he walked, kept muttering, "God, she's heavier than she looks. Why are we doing this again? She's going to kill me when she wakes up." Riley, now out of the body bag and back to his normal clothes, smirked. "Relax. She won't be killing anybody." Daniel unlocked the reinforced basement door and gestured. "Bring her in." They laid Marissa on the narrow mattress David had set up. Her breathing was slow but steady. Lucas had followed instructions precisely, dosing her just below dangerous limits, ensuring she would wake groggy but unharmed. Riley double-checked the restraints attached to the bed frame, simple, soft, medical-grade straps. Nothing cruel, nothing excessive, just enough to ensure she didn't run until David decided how the story ended. Daniel glanced around. The soundproofing panels, the subtle cameras hidden in vents, the keypad lock accessible only from outside. "You've turned this place into a fortress," he murmured. "This is where she wanted to disappear," David said quietly from the doorway. Everyone turned. David had arrived straight from the hotel, the mask of a grieving husband traded for a much colder face. He stepped closer to the bed, staring down at Marissa's unconscious form. Her hair was tousled, Her expression slack, a faint line of drool on the corner of her lip. She looked harmless. She wasn't. David's voice was low, controlled. She wanted a new identity, a new life, a place no one would ever find her. He gestured around the basement. She got it. Lucas swallowed hard. So she's legally dead now? David nodded. By morning, the information will be in every police database. Julia Harper, her new alias, won't exist. Marissa Mercer will be a tragic case file. Riley whistled softly. Damn, that's clean. Daniel watched David closely. You okay? David didn't answer immediately. He knelt beside the bed, brushing a strand of hair from Marissa's face, a strangely tender gesture, completely at odds with the situation. She tried to erase me, he said softly, but I'm the one writing the ending. Marissa stirred slightly, a faint groan escaping her lips, but she didn't wake. Not yet. David stood, his expression unreadable. Place the monitors. Secure the door. Once she wakes up, I'll handle her. Daniel nodded. It's done. Lucas hesitated at the stairs. This is crazy. She's really dead to the world now. David locked eyes with him. That was her choice. He turned toward the basement door, flipping the final switch that activated the soundproof seals. The lock clicked with a heavy, echoing finality. Behind the door, Marissa remained unconscious, unaware that everything she planned had folded in on itself. Unaware she was no longer a wife, no longer a fugitive, no longer a woman with a future. Just a ghost, legally dead, erased, exactly the way she intended, only not on her terms. Chapter 7. Marissa awakens in her new life. Marissa blinked against the dim, gray light, her eyelids heavy as though weighted by lead. The world felt unreal, a surreal haze pressing against her skull. Every breath was thick, every movement sluggish. The bed beneath her was firm, yet unfamiliar. The walls were bare concrete, and the faint hum of unseen machinery filled the space. Her head swam as she tried to sit up, but straps secured her wrists and ankles. Panic flared. She struggled, tugging at the restraints, the leather and soft padding resisting her. Her heartbeat quickened, rapid and erratic, each thump echoing in her ears. A sudden mechanical click drew her attention to the small intercom embedded in the wall opposite the bed. A calm, male voice spoke through it, David's. "Good morning, Marissa," he said, his tone soft yet commanding, carrying the authority of a man who had meticulously planned this moment. Marissa froze. Her mouth opened, then closed, searching for words. David?" Her voice was hoarse, weak, disbelief lacing each syllable. Where am I?" "You're awake," David replied. "Good. I was hoping for that." There was a faint humor in his voice, but it didn't mask the edge beneath it. "You're in your new home." "My home," she whispered. Her gaze darted around the soundproofed basement. This isn't my home." "It's as close as it gets," David said, "to the life you've created, or, rather, the one you thought you were creating. The one the world believes you've moved into. Except now it's not outside. It's right here." Marissa's mind spun. The straps, the muted lighting, the strange silence of the basement. It all collided with the fragments of her memory. The car crash, the staged death, the manipulation, the planning, it all led here. To him. To David. Her chest tightened. You did this?" "I didn't have to," he said. "But you forced my hand. You staged your own death, spent months preparing to vanish, to steal everything. So I gave you exactly what you wanted, just not the way you intended." Marissa's hands clawed at her restraints again. "Let me go. This is insane. You can't do this." Her voice rose, full of fear and desperation. "People will come for me. The police, Julian Hill. David interrupted, calm and deliberate. "They already believe you're gone, Marissa. Legally dead. Cremated. Your funeral was yesterday. Candles, eulogies, flowers. The media covered it. All your neighbors mourned. And Julian, he panicked, trying to save himself before even thinking about saving you." Marissa's breathing quickened. Her mind struggled to absorb the words. No, you're lying." He would, "I'm not," David said. "You were the mastermind. You orchestrated everything. I know the truth, Every detail. The affair, the financials, the fake IDs, the staged disappearance. Everything you thought you could hide, I know. And now the world thinks you're gone. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head violently. I can't. David's voice softened for a moment. Look at this. A small screen flickered on the far wall. It displayed a live news broadcast, footage of her so-called funeral. Crowds gathered outside the chapel, journalists murmuring into cameras, flowers laid atop a polished wooden casket. Voices of reporters overlaid the solemn images. Her friends wept. Her family solemnly nodded, all captured in high-definition clarity for the world to see. Marissa felt nausea rise in her throat. She wanted to scream, to flee, to tear the screen from the wall, but her restraints held her fast. Every detail of the broadcast confirmed it. She was a ghost to the world, a figure erased. Every camera angle, every zoom in of the casket's polished wood, and the black and white photographs of her smiling face drove the truth deeper into her mind. David continued, his voice steady. You're legally dead. Everyone believes you perished. The funeral, the memorial, the social records, even the police reports, they all confirm it. And Julian? He's lost Marissa. He's scared. Cold panic. Not for you, not for what you're going through, but for himself. He's thinking only about his own survival. Marissa's hands shook against the restraints. Her breath came in short gasps. What about him? He loved me. David's voice was sharp now, the edge unmistakable. Love? Julian never loved you. He never cared about you. He cared about the money, the power, the escape. And when your fake death went into motion, he realized he had no control. He focused entirely on saving himself. That's the man you trusted. That's the man who thought he could manipulate you and me into nothing. Marissa's head fell back against the mattress. Tears slid down her cheeks, hot and bitter. Her mind raced, replaying everything, the affair, the stolen glances, the secret meetings. And now this, being trapped underground, powerless, helpless, humiliated. I can't believe this, she whispered, her voice barely audible, cracking at the edges. How did you? David's calm, unwavering voice answered. Patience, planning, observation. I let you think you were in control. I watched as you plotted, as you schemed. I let you perform every step of your plan because I knew, eventually, you'd lead yourself here, right into the space I prepared for you. Marissa whimpered, the sound half sob, half disbelief. You tricked me. You used me. David's tone was precise, almost clinical. I let you do all the work. You made every move, every decision, every choice. I just waited. And now, you are where you belong. The world thinks you're dead. Julian is panicked. And I know everything. Every detail. Every intention. Her hands shook violently, fists pressing against the padded restraints. You can't keep me here. This isn't reality. David allowed a small pause, letting her panic simmer. Reality is exactly what you made it. You staged your own death. You thought you could escape, disappear, and control everything, including me. But reality is I control this ending. And I'm not moving Marissa. Not until you understand just how far your choices have taken you. Marissa's chest heaved as tears poured freely, the weight of the truth pressing against her, suffocating. The intercom crackled again. Watch carefully, David said. The screen flickered again, showing Julian's reaction to her death. Unlike the mournful friends and family at the funeral, Julian was frantic, pacing in his office, muttering, dialing numbers he didn't reach. Sweat gleamed on his forehead, his usual composed, calculating demeanor shattered. He wasn't concerned for her. He was calculating the loss, what it meant for him. Assets, power, escape routes, he thought only of himself. Marissa's eyes widened, comprehension dawning. He doesn't even care. David's voice softened slightly. No, he doesn't. But I do. That's why you're here. That's why you'll face the consequences of your choices. And while the world believes you're gone, you're not. At least, not yet. The truth settled on Marissa like a lead blanket, erased from the world, powerless, trapped, and facing the man who had watched her every move, and now controlled her fate. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I'm dead to them, dead to him." David's voice, calm and resolute through the intercom, closed the moment. "Exactly. And I know everything you planned." Chapter 8, Julian's Downfall. The morning sun was still low when David arrived at his office. From the outside, the building looked pristine, glass windows glinting, the kind of corporate headquarters that symbolize success and stability. But inside, the truth was wrought hidden beneath polished surfaces. Daniel was already there, sifting through financial statements and digital records, his brow furrowed in concentration. "David," he said without looking up, voice tense, "I've traced Julian's offshore accounts. Shell companies, secret wire transfers, fake invoices. He's been moving millions without your knowledge. Some of it looks legal at first glance, but it's all manipulation. Fraud, tax evasion, laundering, you name it." David leaned over the stack of papers, the numbers and bank codes swimming in his vision. "Every penny we trusted him with," he muttered. "Every penny," Daniel confirmed. "He's been siphoning funds for years. And you know what's worse? Some of it is tied directly to Marissa's disappearance plan. He's trying to cover both tracks simultaneously." David's fists clenched. The man I considered a partner, a friend, his jaw tightened. He never thought about loyalty, never about anyone but himself. Daniel's gaze hardened. "Exactly. And now, he's going to pay for it. But carefully. We need to make sure the federal agents have everything airtight. No loose ends, no excuses, no lawyers finding holes." David nodded. He had already given Daniel the go-ahead weeks ago, letting him dig while he focused on containing Marissa's new life. The plan was meticulous, a chess game played over months. By midday, the operation was ready. Federal agents arrived in unmarked vehicles, quietly surrounding the office. David watched from a distance, dressed in a casual blazer that made him blend into the morning crowd. He could see Julian through the tinted windows, pacing back and forth in his office, phone pressed tightly to his ear. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his normally composed demeanor cracking with anxiety. "Ready," Daniel whispered, standing beside David in the shadow of a neighboring building. David exhaled slowly. "Let's end this." The agents moved with precision. They had warrants in hand, evidence meticulously cataloged. They entered the building, their presence swift, authoritative. David watched as Julian's assistant froze mid-step, eyes widening in alarm. "Mr. Hart," one agent called out, voice firm, "you're under arrest. Federal charges, wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent." Julian dropped the phone, spinning toward the agents with a look of pure disbelief. This is impossible," he shouted, his voice cracking. You can't do this. I run this company. Turn around and place your hands behind your back," an agent barked. Julian hesitated, wild-eyed, pacing in panic, before finally raising his hands in defeat. David allowed himself a brief smile, hidden behind a reflective glass panel. He could see it all unfold, Julian's empire of deceit crumbling in real time. Every wire transfer, every offshore account, every falsified ledger Daniel had painstakingly uncovered was about to hold him accountable. "Look at him," Daniel murmured, voice tinged with satisfaction. The man who manipulated everyone. The man who thought he could control the world. Reduced to this. David's gaze lingered on Julian, now escorted down the hall by agents, handcuffed, the reality of his crimes sinking in. He had wanted justice, not revenge, but watching it executed so cleanly stirred a quiet sense of triumph within him. Meanwhile, in the basement, Marissa watched everything unfold through the hidden camera screens. Her face was pale, a mix of disbelief, fear, and grudging fascination. She had spent weeks orchestrating a perfect escape, thinking she had all the power. Now, she was witnessing Julian, the man she had loved and trusted, being stripped of everything. David's voice came through the intercom, calm and unyielding. "Look closely, Marissa. Every plan he made for himself, every manipulation he orchestrated, it all ends here." Marissa's lips trembled. "He never loved me," she whispered. David's voice sharpened, cutting through her denial. "No, Julian never loved you. He used you, just as he used everyone else. He saw you as a tool, a means to an end, and nothing more." The screens flickered, showing Julian being loaded into the back of a federal SUV. Agents held his arms firmly, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the handcuffs and his crumbling empire. Reporters outside were already snapping photos, journalists murmuring details of the federal raid. Within hours, the news cycle would explode. Julian Hart, the celebrated business partner and friend, now facing decades in prison. Marissa sank into the mattress, her hands clenching the straps that held her. I trusted him," she murmured. "I believed in him. All of it was lies." David's tone remained steady, unwavering. "Yes, all of it. And now you see the truth. The man who promised you love, who promised security, wasn't a partner in life or crime. He was a predator, and now the law has caught him." Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. Part of her had hoped Julian's loyalty would outlast her disappearance plan, that he would somehow rescue her. Now she understood the depth of her own miscalculation. David's voice softened slightly, almost like a teacher correcting a stubborn student. "Sometimes the people we think are closest to us are the ones who will use us most efficiently. Julian's downfall is a reminder of that. You were never the victim. He never cared about you. He only cared about his survival, and now, even that is gone." The final image on the screens showed Julian being led into the federal van, his head hanging low, the agents closing the door behind him. The sound of the engine starting was muffled but distinct, a symbolic closing of the chapter on a man who had once thought he was untouchable. David stepped away from the intercom, letting Marissa absorb it. He had delivered the truth plainly, without theatrics, without unnecessary cruelty. Julian's fate was already sealed. Marissa's gaze remained glued to the screens, her face pale, her lips parted. She had watched the man she thought loved her crumble before her eyes, and there was nothing she could do to intervene, nothing she could change. David's final words to her, calm, unyielding, and truthful, echoed in the room. "Julian never loved you. He used you." Chapter 9, The Choice. The basement was silent, save for the faint hum of the air circulation system and the occasional drip of condensation along the walls. Weeks had passed since Marissa's awakening, and in that time, the reality of her situation had sunk in like stones into water. She had spent days pacing, staring at the walls, replaying every detail of her betrayal, every step she had taken to erase her life and manipulate everyone around her. Now, she sat cross-legged on the small mattress, her head buried in her hands, hair falling in disheveled waves around her face. The intercom crackled, startling her. "Marissa," David's voice called, calm yet insistent. "It's time we talk. Face to face." Her heart thumped violently. Face to face. That phrase carried weight. Authority. Judgment. The words of the man who had orchestrated the collapse of her plans and now held every key to her future, or the lack thereof. I'm ready," she whispered to herself, voice trembling. The restraints had been removed weeks ago, but the mental chains felt heavier than any leather strap. David descended the narrow stairs, his movements quiet, deliberate. He stopped a few feet away from her, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. The weight of weeks of planning, deception, and surveillance seemed to radiate from him. Marissa looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, puffy from sleepless nights and tears she hadn't bothered to hide. "David, her voice faltered. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," David said, taking a slow step forward. "I've seen enough already. I know everything you intended to do. Every plan, every scheme. I know the person you thought you could become. And I know who you really are now." Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around her knees. I destroyed everything. I destroyed us. I destroyed Leia's life. I can't undo it." David's expression softened for just a moment, though his voice remained firm. "No, you can't undo it. But you have a choice now, and you need to choose wisely." Marissa's head dropped again. "Choice? There is no choice. I'm trapped." David shook his head. There is a choice. Two of them. And you need to understand what each one means. He stepped closer, pulling up a small chair and sitting across from her. Option 1. You stay here. Permanently. Safe. Federal erased from the world. No one will know you exist, and you will have nothing to manipulate or control. You will live, but as a ghost. Marissa's lips trembled. A ghost. She whispered the word like a curse, the air around her thick with despair. So I would just rot here? Forget the sunlight? Forget Leia? David nodded. Yes. You would live, but only within these walls. You would have survival, nothing more. Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But the truth pressed down on her. Even if she wanted to escape, there was nowhere to go. Not anymore. David continued, his voice unwavering. Option 2. I arrange a real disappearance. A new identity, a new city, a new life. You can leave this place, walk out into the world, and start over. But there are conditions. You will never contact me. Never contact Leia. Never attempt to find her. If you break these rules, the consequences are irreversible. No second chances. Marissa's tears flowed freely now, hot and bitter. Her mind spun with the weight of her choices. Never see her. Never see Leia. Her voice cracked. She's all I have left in the world. David's tone was gentle but firm. I will send you occasional photos of Leia. Enough to know she's alive, thriving. But you will never reach her. That is the only way this can work. The only way you can truly be free. And the only way Leia remains safe. Marissa pressed her face into her hands, shaking. I don't know if I can live like that. Without her, David leaned back, silent, giving her a moment to absorb it all. Minutes stretched in the quiet basement. The only sound was the faint whir of the ventilation system and her shallow, irregular breathing. Finally, she lifted her head. Her eyes glistened with grief, but also with something David recognized instantly, clarity. Option 2, she whispered, voice trembling but determined. I'll choose option 2. David nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Are you certain? Marissa's hands trembled as she nodded. Yes, I have to. It's the only way. I can't stay here. I can't rot away in a cage of my own making. I have to leave, even if it kills me to be apart from her. David remained quiet for a long moment, letting the weight of her choice settle between them. Very well, he said finally. We will prepare everything. You will be Clara Hayes. A new identity, a new city. You will start over completely, and you will understand that your actions have consequences, always. Marissa lowered her head again, sobs shaking her shoulders. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. David's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. Good. That's the first step toward truly living. But remember this, Marissa, no matter how far you go, the life you built here, the lies, the manipulations, they are part of your past now. The choice is yours, but comes with boundaries. Boundaries you cannot cross. She nodded again, swallowing back her sobs, tears streaming down her face. I accept. I understand everything. I'll obey. David stood and walked to the corner of the basement, retrieving a small binder and a stack of documents. He placed them carefully on the table. Everything you need, your new identity, the location, the rules, is in here. Study it. Memorize it. Follow it exactly. Any deviation will have consequences that cannot be undone. Marissa took the binder with shaking hands, tracing the cover, breathing in sharply as the reality of her choice finally hit her. I can't believe this is my life now, she whispered. David's gaze was steady. It is, but it's also a second chance. A real chance. You chose freedom, but freedom always comes at a cost, and you will honor that cost. Marissa's chest rose and fell, her sobs slowly quieting as she folded herself around the binder. The basement felt smaller somehow, yet the weight of the world outside pressed in on her. The last remnants of defiance and hope were gone, replaced by acceptance. David's voice, calm and unwavering, concluded the conversation. Then it settled. Option 2. You leave this place, this life, but you will never see me or Leia again. Understand that clearly. Marissa nodded, tears still streaming. I understand. And with that, the choice was made. Chapter 10. Marissa becomes Clara Hayes. The flight to Montana was silent, almost painfully so. Marissa, now Clara Hayes, sat by the window, staring out at the clouds, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Each breath she took reminded her of the life she had left behind, a life of manipulation, betrayal, and destruction. She was legally dead, erased from the world, and yet very much alive. The weight of that paradox pressed down on her chest. David's instructions had been clear: do not contact anyone. Do not try to search for Leah. Accept the new identity, the new city, the new life. And though the binders, documents, and new identification were all carefully arranged, the mental leap was far harder than the physical relocation. The small airport in Whitefish felt quiet and foreign, the crisp mountain air biting at her cheeks as she stepped outside. She adjusted the scarf around her neck, pulling the hood tight, hoping to vanish into anonymity. A modest car, registered under her new name, waited. The license plate had been prepped, the registration transferred. Clara Hayes was ready. Her apartment was simple, 2 rooms above a hardware store on the main street of the town. The living space was modest, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom with a view of the mountains in the distance. It was clean, functional, but utterly devoid of the life she had once known. No photographs of Leah, no reminders of David or her old home. Just herself and the quiet hum of a new reality. The hardware store downstairs became her anchor. Each morning, she opened the shop, stacking boxes, assisting customers with nails and paintbrushes, hammers, and screwdrivers. The work was honest, repetitive, and grounding. She rarely spoke more than necessary, her tone polite but cautious, always aware that she was under a new name and a new set of eyes. Clara Hayes began to adapt. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her survival instincts recalibrated. She learned the rhythms of small-town life, the regulars who came in for birdseed or light bulbs, the postman who tipped his hat as he passed by, the elderly couple who preferred to order everything by phone. She kept her distance, made herself small, and over time, the fear and guilt that had followed her from the basement became a dull ache rather than a constant pulse. Evenings were the hardest. Alone in the apartment, she would sit by the window, staring at the dim glow of streetlights reflecting on the quiet streets. She missed Leah more than she had ever thought possible. She missed the sound of her laughter, the weight of her little hands in her own, the certainty of her presence. These were luxuries she could not have anymore. David's rules echoed in her mind constantly. Do not contact. Do not search. Do not disrupt. The thought of breaking them was almost unbearable, but temptation always lingered. It happened one evening while she was idly browsing the small public library, the free Wi-Fi casting a pale glow on her face. She typed Leah's name into a search engine. Her heart raced as she scrolled through results, desperate for a glimpse of the life she had left behind. She felt a pang of hope, a flicker that perhaps she could find her daughter and reconnect, if only virtually. Suddenly, her laptop beeped, a soft, almost imperceptible tone that made her jump. A small notification popped up on the screen, a digital warning, but no words. Just a subtle, unmistakable signal she had crossed a line. Her pulse spiked. Clara Hayes, a name that now felt more like a cage than a freedom, reminded her, silently but insistently, of the consequences. She closed the laptop quickly, hands shaking, the color draining from her face. A shiver ran through her as the reality settled. The only lifeline she had to her daughter was through David's careful management, the envelopes with photos, the silent reassurance that Leah was alive and well. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and bitter. She sat back, pressing her face into her hands, the sobs muffled. Every instinct told her to cry out, to reach for a connection that had been brutally severed. And yet, instinct and fear collided. She obeyed the warning, realizing in a harrowing instant that David's surveillance, or his clever digital design, was omnipresent. Any attempt to circumvent the rules would not just be futile, it could destroy the fragile thread that linked her to Leah's life. Days turned into weeks, and Marissa, now Clara, fell into a quiet rhythm. She swept the floors of the hardware store, organized shelves, assisted customers with careful smiles. At night, she cooked simple meals, read books she had long neglected, and sometimes wrote letters she never sent. She stared at the mountains from her window, the peaks bathed in snow or sunlight, depending on the season, and tried to imagine a life beyond guilt and secrecy. Yet the envelopes from David were her tether, each one a reminder that, though she was legally dead, she had not entirely vanished from the world of those she loved most. Leia's smiles, captured in photographs, became her lifeline. The images of her daughter thriving, laughing, growing, tiny slices of reality she could cling to, a proof that her choices had not completely severed that bond. Still, the temptation to search, to dig, to connect lingered. Clara Hayes, a name she had grown into reluctantly, reminded her constantly that she was not free to reclaim what she had lost. She could see it in her reflection in the small kitchen window, in the quiet, measured way she now moved through the world. She had survived the basement, the manipulation, the disappearance. She had survived Julian's downfall and David's calculated plans. But this, the quiet life, the constant surveillance, the delicate tether to her daughter, was different. It was subtle, slow, almost imperceptible punishment, and she obeyed. Every time she felt the pull to search for Leia online, she remembered the silent warning. She obeyed. Every time she thought about reaching out, about tracing her old life, she obeyed. Because she could not risk the envelopes. Because they were the only proof that her daughter was alive. Because, in the end, freedom had a cost, and Clara Hayes had learned that obedience was the only path to survival. The snow began to fall lightly outside, coating the streets of Whitefish in quiet white. Clara Hayes sat at her small table, envelope in hand, a photograph of Leia pressed close to her chest. The quiet, lonely life she had feared had arrived, and she had adapted. She would continue to adapt. She would continue to obey, because losing Leia completely was a price she could never pay. Chapter 11, David's New Beginning. The morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of David Mercer's office, casting warm golden streaks across polished mahogany and glass. He sipped his coffee, the rich aroma grounding him as he surveyed the bustling activity below. His company, once crippled by Julian Hart's manipulations, was thriving. The public fallout from Julian's arrest had inadvertently bolstered investor confidence in David's leadership. What had once been a delicate balancing act of trust and vigilance was now solid footing, a business reclaimed and expanded. Daniel leaned against the doorway, laptop in hand, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. I have to admit, you've handled this remarkably. Julian in prison, his schemes exposed, your company growing, it's almost poetic. David allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine one he had in months. Poetic, he murmured. I suppose it is. Hard won, carefully orchestrated, and thoroughly deserved. He paused, taking a slow breath. But it's still surreal. 5 years ago, my life looked entirely different. Now, his gaze drifted toward the skyline, the afternoon sun reflecting off nearby office buildings. Now it's quieter, safer, more controlled. Daniel closed his laptop, walking closer. Quieter, yes, but don't let it lull you into complacency. People like Julian always leave awake. You just have to stay sharp. I know, David said, taking a final sip of his coffee. He set the cup down, the weight of past months pressing lightly against him, not as a burden, but as a reminder. A reminder of what he had survived, of what he had rebuilt. He glanced at a photograph on his desk. Leia, smiling widely, her hair cascading over her shoulders, standing beside a mountain lake on a college trip. The image, warm and full of life, carried a quiet triumph. She had excelled academically, socially, emotionally. She had flourished under his care, and for the first time in years, David allowed himself to savor that. Later that day, he returned home to a quiet house, the air faintly scented with a lingering aroma of coffee and evening meals. Leia was sprawled across the living room couch, laptop open, headphones in, typing furiously at her thesis. She glanced up, smiled, and waved. "Hey, Dad. Guess what? Professor Monroe says my research proposal is excellent. I might even get published." David approached, ruffling her hair affectionately. "That's incredible, Leia. I'm proud of you. All your hard work is paying off." She grinned, her enthusiasm infectious. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without your support, even if you were way too controlling sometimes." He chuckled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Control is my specialty, apparently. But hey, if it gets results, I consider it a victory." Later that evening, David settled into his study, carefully preparing the envelopes that would go to Marissa, now Clara Hayes. Each contained a photograph of Leia, a snapshot at a college art exhibit, another at a soccer game, one with friends gathered for a birthday celebration. Every image was curated with care. Every envelope was a reminder of mercy and a quiet punishment. Marissa would see that her daughter was thriving, alive, and loved, but she would never be able to reach her. She would live with the knowledge of life going on without her, the consequences of her own choices pressing against her silently, month after month. As he sealed the first envelope, he paused, staring at it for a long moment. "This is the only way," he murmured to himself. "The only balance between mercy and justice." Outside, the night was calm. Snow lightly dusted the streets, reflecting the golden glow of streetlights. David stepped onto the porch, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. Julian Hart was in federal prison now, facing decades behind bars for wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The man who had manipulated, lied, and tried to destroy his life was contained, held accountable by the law, and David's meticulous planning had ensured it. Inside, the warmth of his home contrasted with the chill outside. He returned to his study, setting the envelopes in a neat stack by the door. Each one was ready for mailing, a ritual that reminded him of the life he had fought to protect and rebuild. Leia was safe, growing, and thriving. That was what mattered. That was the new beginning he had worked for. He glanced at his reflection in the window, seeing a man shaped by betrayal, loss, and meticulous strategy, but also resilience. He had survived Julian's betrayal, Marissa's disappearance plan, and the manipulations that could have destroyed his life entirely. And now he had rebuilt it, piece by piece, carefully, intentionally. David walked to the living room, watching Leia pack her books for the next day. He thought about the years ahead, the milestones, the growth, the shared moments they would have. He allowed himself to plan for hope instead of revenge, for life instead of mere survival. As he prepared to leave for a late dinner with a new acquaintance, someone cautiously entering his life, someone he hoped could be more than just a distraction, he felt a quiet sense of equilibrium. Love, trust, joy, cautious, careful, but real was beginning to return. He allowed himself a small smile, the first in months that didn't feel forced. The envelopes to Marissa remained on the desk, each a reminder of mercy and consequence, a thread to a past that had been carefully severed yet monitored. David knew she would open them. She would see Leia thriving. She would feel the distance she had created and the pain of her choices. It was a silent justice, a measured balance between punishment and compassion. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. Julian Hart was in prison. His company had recovered, even grown stronger. Leia was excelling in college. His life, painstakingly rebuilt, was finally his again. The darkness of the past was behind him, or at least contained where it belonged. David's final thought that night was simple, clear, and firm. The future belonged to him now. Chapter 12, The Final Resolution. 5 years had passed, and the world had shifted quietly around David Mercer. The once sharp edges of betrayal and pain had dulled, replaced by the steady rhythms of a life rebuilt on his own terms. The Mercer home, now fully renovated, gleamed under the morning sun. The gardens were carefully tended, the scent of blooming roses wafting through the air, a testament to the patience and persistence he had poured into his life. David stood on the porch, sipping coffee from his favorite mug, feeling the warmth seep into his hands. The quiet hum of birds and distant traffic contrasted with the chaotic storm of memories that still lingered in the corners of his mind. Julian Hart remained in federal prison, his empire dismantled, his schemes exposed. David had never relished revenge for its own sake, but seeing justice done had offered a quiet satisfaction, a punctuation mark on a chapter of his life that had once teetered on the brink of ruin. Inside, Leia moved through the kitchen, her laughter spilling over as she recounted her day. She had grown into a young woman with confidence and warmth, her personality a perfect balance of independence and love. David's chest swelled with pride as he watched her gather ingredients for dinner, humming a tune she had learned at college. "You know," Leia said, glancing at him over her shoulder, "Professor Monroe complimented my research presentation again. He said my analysis was sharp, insightful. Basically, he wants to see me publish this semester." David smiled, ruffling her hair. "I'm not surprised. You've always had that spark. You just needed a little room to let it shine." "Room?" she teased. "I've had plenty of room to mess things up. You should see my dorm's kitchen. It's a disaster zone." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Maybe so, but look at you. Thriving. That's what matters." The house felt alive, filled with a warmth David had almost forgotten existed. The years of manipulation, betrayal, and isolation were behind him, or at least contained in the memory of events that had shaped him. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more patient. He had learned that control was not about holding power over others, but about creating stability for those he loved, especially Leia. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, Marissa, now Clara Hayes, lived in quiet exile. Whitefish, Montana, had become her small world, a place of anonymity and solitude. She worked long hours at a hardware store, her apartment above the shop modest and neat, a life stripped of luxury, but safe and sustainable. The photographs of Leia arrived monthly, each envelope a delicate reminder that her daughter was alive, thriving, and loved by the father she had betrayed. Marissa sat in the evening light, staring at one such photo. Leia's smile seemed to beam from the paper, innocent and vibrant, a life Clara could never touch. A pang of guilt twisted in her chest. She had escaped, yes, but at a cost, the cost of watching from afar, forever disconnected. Her reflection in the window showed someone older, wearier, haunted by the choices that had led her here. Each day, she aged slightly faster, the weight of her own guilt pressing down, shaping her into someone she barely recognized. Back in the Mercer home, David leaned against the banister, watching Leia settle into her evening routine. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The staged death, the manipulations, the betrayals, they were chapters he had endured and, ultimately, outgrown. Revenge had never been the goal. Rebuilding himself, protecting Leia, and reclaiming a sense of normalcy had been the true objectives. He thought about Marissa, the woman who had once shared his bed, his life, and his trust. She had orchestrated her own disappearance, thinking she would gain freedom and power. Yet, in the end, she was the one erased. Legally dead, living under a new identity, watching from a distance, her life a quiet echo of what it had been. Ironically, she had achieved exactly what she had planned for him, erasure, but it had come at a cost she had never anticipated: the isolation of guilt, the absence of her daughter, the lack of connection. David sighed, a quiet, peaceful exhalation that seemed to carry away years of tension. He no longer felt the burning desire for vengeance. The satisfaction of seeing Julian punished, of protecting Leia, and of reclaiming his life had replaced the need for retribution. Moving forward without Marissa was not a loss, but a liberation, a freedom he had earned through patience, strategy, and endurance. Leia approached, holding a mug of hot chocolate, her eyes bright. "Dad, you've been staring at that banister for 10 minutes. Are you daydreaming again?" David chuckled softly, taking the mug. "Maybe I am, or maybe I'm just appreciating the life we've rebuilt. 5 years ago, I never would have imagined mornings like this." Leia sat beside him on the sofa, leaning against his shoulder. "Well, we've earned it, haven't we? You've worked so hard. And we've both learned a lot along the way. Yes, we have, David admitted, letting the warmth of the moment sink in. He took a slow sip of his drink, savoring the richness, the simplicity, and the normalcy. And it's only going to get better, step by step, day by day. Outside, the sky began to darken, painted in strokes of deep orange and purple. The house glowed softly from within, a beacon of safety and stability in a world that had once threatened to collapse around them. David glanced toward the horizon, reflecting on the journey, the loss, and the resilience that had defined these years. He thought again of Marissa Clara Hayes, alive, distant, burdened by the consequences of her choices, living quietly and alone. And he felt no triumph in her suffering, only acknowledgement of the balance of justice. She had received her fate, and he had received his, a life rebuilt, a daughter thriving in peace. David looked at Leah, her laughter filling the room as she recounted a story from her day, and he finally understood the true measure of victory. It wasn't in destroying those who had hurt him. It wasn't in orchestrating perfect revenge or watching others crumble. True peace was in the reclamation of life, in presence, in love, and in moving forward without the shadows of the past dictating every decision. The world outside continued its quiet rhythm. Seasons would change. Leah would grow. Challenges would arrive. But David Mercer, fortified by years of struggle and careful strategy, was ready to meet them. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a final, profound sense of calm.